Make sure pupils don't ever use their mobile phone in school, says the Education Secretary. Well, that's a ramp up in expectations. Hi, everybody at the Chalk Face, and hello, Craig. I was having a chat a few weeks ago, Craig, with Kat about mobile phones in schools. So if you're watching this thinking, haven't they already discussed this? Am I getting some deja vu? We have already discussed this, but when I talked to Kat, it was because we became aware of a letter that the Shadow Education Secretary, Laura Trott, had sent to His Majesty's Chief Inspector, Sir Martin Oliver, suggesting that schools should fail their Ofsted inspection on safeguarding if students were using mobile phones in school. And at the time, the government was saying, look, we've already got guidance in place. Schools can already ban mobile phones if they want to. There's nothing more that we need to do. Everything is fine. And interestingly, what seems just like a few weeks later, the government have now issued new guidance to schools. And what's interesting about that is that Ofsted have said, although it's guidance, if the school doesn't follow it, then you are at risk of not meeting the expected standard. So, Craig, let's have a look into this guidance. Let's see what it says. Let's have a chat about it.
Yeah, and it's that line for me, isn't it? Because I watched the episode. It's I think you enjoy it when I have to go away for a few days or whatever, because it's like, oh, I get to get Cat on. But I tell you what, they are good videos. And I watched that and I found myself nodding away like one of those little Churchill dogs in the front of a car. Cat's very well spoken, very eloquent. And I'm thinking, yes, I have a balanced, pragmatic approach, he was saying, to the use of technology and, all the benefits, and leave it to the teacher. And I was like, it was good, case closed. But then this hits, and you did mention it, but when I was reading it was a BBC article on it. It was the fact that more and more guidance coming out these days is non-statutory, so it's not legally required. Schools can do what they want. You can have the freedom to implement your own policies as best you see fit. Not when the Ofsted sledgehammer is over the head, saying it may be non-statutory, but if you don't follow this, we'll probably fail you. Well, not fail. You won't meet the expected standards. Well,
and it is causing a bit of a stir. I mean, the unions
Sorry, go on.
The unions are not very happy that Ofsted somehow seem to have, renewed powers or an expectation that they look at what the policy of the school is, and if then the school aren't sort of doing what it says in the policy, that somehow they would be able to take some action against the school. People are not very happy that that's not really Ofsted's role to be looking at policies like that.
I think there's a lot in here. So we're careful to turn into a 2-hour episode because we're known to talk, but there's a lot in here. But for me, that's the crux of it. Fine. If the government of the day that's democratically elected comes out with statutory legal guidance, then it's a black and white line. You may disagree, but heck, the number of times I disagreed with a policy my SLT came up with, but when they came up with it, I would implement it because that's what I was told. And that's the way you go. But when it's non-statutory, and in a given school, in my school had been 90 teachers. You've got thousands and thousands of hours and years worth of teaching experience combined across that school there. And you're telling them, no, you will fail, because that's the big thing. I mean, that's the big thing. We will fail you. You won't meet the expected standards. Well, you are then telling me how to do it. Presumably these people get their degrees and go through teaching experience, and then the years of experience on the job and the ongoing CBT, CPD. Oh dear, what's happening with me today? And you're then not giving them the autonomy in order to make the right decisions. I won't go too down it, but I listed off the top of my head 5 or 6 instant tools I could think of on mobile phones that I was using in my last few years of teaching. And I've been out of the classroom for 3 years. I did a quick question to ChatGPT. I won't read it out. I first of all asked for the benefits of using mobile phone technology in school. And of course, it listed tons, warned me about the potential risks, which I understand. Then I said, give me a list of common modern apps which can be used specifically in the classroom to help with teaching and learning. And it came up with 30 before it stopped.
Yeah, but no, Craig. You see, Bridget Phillipson, who I'm not sure she's ever been a teacher, but Bridget, in her infinite wisdom, has said it's not appropriate for phones to be used as calculators or for research during lessons. So that
Okay.
is,
How
that's
about
that.
how about as formative assessment tools then?
No,
Kahoot, quizzes, Meter,
no,
Socrative, Google
no,
Forms, Padlet,
no,
Nearpod, Clickers, Poll,
definitely not.
Edu, Flip It,
No,
Booklet, Formative,
no, no,
ClassKit, Seesaw,
no,
Jamboard.
no.
Okay.
Are you not listening?
I was looking down this thinking, these are all companies that have specifically made they'll be sitting there going, well, we're going under then, aren't we? No UK market anymore. Because again, if you're not aware, it's not just a case of even in your bag, not seen, not heard, is it? If they're not seen or not heard, it's okay. They're saying not even in their bags.
Yeah, this is the big difference. Let's outline what's
this is an
really changed
escalation.
here. This is an escalation. So up until now, schools have been able to have their own sort of mobile phone policy, and largely, upwards of 97% of schools had a policy of it's not to be seen or heard, it's to be kept in the bag or the pocket, out of sight, out of mind. If a teacher then at their discretion wants the student to use the phone in lesson for whatever the purpose might be, then they have that discretion, but the teacher is always in control. And that's largely sort of what 97% plus schools had as their policy. But the difference here is that the guidance now is so much stronger, and it says no, students shouldn't have their mobile phone on them at all during the school day. So that means they shouldn't have it in lessons, even at the teacher's discretion. They shouldn't have it when they're walking the corridors. They shouldn't have it at break time. They shouldn't have it at lunchtime. The only time they can have it is before school and after school. And we'll talk about where students are supposed to be putting their phones if they're walking to school with them and walking home with them. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's the big escalation. It's no, this isn't really teacher discretion anymore. This is you cannot have it on your possession. And what's interesting is what can schools do about it then? Well, one thing they are allowed to do is they are allowed to confiscate phones. Now, they've always been allowed to confiscate phones and things like that, things that are causing distractions and whatever in school. Largely, they confiscate things due to safeguarding issues. So it does kind of bring into focus again, is the mobile phone a safeguarding issue? But they can confiscate phones from students. And the difference here is they can confiscate the phone from the student if it's in their bag. If it's at all on their possession, then they can be confiscated. And what people don't realise is that teachers are not liable under law for any loss or damage. If I confiscate a mobile phone off a student, it could be £1,000 iPhone. If I then lose it or I damage it by accident, then I'm not liable for any of that damage at all. I'm protected in law.
Yeah, and this is true. I mean, these pounds have been here for a while. So we go, oh, you don't have the rights. You can't search my bag. Well, that's not true. There's actually statutory guidance, legal protections. Suspicion of a phone in a bag would be a reason to seize the bag, very strong wording, search it and remove that pupil's property, which a parent, as you say, may have paid upwards of £1,000 of. Now, obviously, we take good care to it, but then, these are serious things. And of course, this causes extra risks and headaches for senior leaders as well. Because
and searching students. I mean, searching students has been going on for a long time, but you typically search students when you think that they might have tobacco on them, they've got drugs on them, they've got a knife on them, something that is a genuine safeguarding issue, then you have the right to search a student. But now what they're saying is, no, you can search a student for a mobile phone. That's a massive escalation.
Yeah, it really is. And of course, along with this, we should point out, they've therefore strengthened the non-statutory guidance around the use of mobile phones for everyone else in the school. And by that, we mean teachers and indeed sixth formers, who, let's not forget, a lot of them are 18. They are legal adults. They can vote, they can drive, they can smoke, and everything else that adults can do. So teachers should not be using phones in front of pupils for personal reasons. I actually don't have a huge problem with that one at all. I think that is probably fair and valid. But sixth formers as well, where we're giving them that increase of autonomy, that young adult experience. They're going to go off to college or university. Please don't use your... Now, they don't have to have them confiscated, and they don't have to have them out of their bags, but they should not be seen to be using them. And an actual shift here, I noticed, a little subtle, but the government are trying to frame it, and that now we should be actually teaching students the cultural value and benefits of having a mobile-free learning environment. So this non-statutory guidance is now shifting as well to sort of like a policy of educating of the cultural benefits of it. It is a big shift. I mean, it's mobile phones, they seem to let schools do what they want and be fine with the fact, when I was in teaching 3 years ago, that we were the educators and we would use them sensibly to direct students in their learning, and we would sanction appropriately. But in the last 3 years, it's escalating in jumps and jumps. And this latest one is the clearest one. And with the Ofsted expectation that, well, it's non-statutory, but if you don't follow it and we find you're not following it, you probably won't meet the expected standards. That's a big shift.
You said about, educating students that having a phone-free environment is desirable and valuable, and explicitly teaching that. Now, typically, I guess schools will do that through assemblies and those kinds of methods, and just the ethos of the school of, look, we don't have our phones out here. It does give schools more clout, though. It does enable them to say to the students, look, these aren't our rules. This is what the government says we should be doing in our school. This is what the inspectorate says we should be doing in our school. So don't blame me. I'm just following the guidance. So in that sense, I think that's quite a powerful tool for the teachers and senior leaders in the school. But it's also about educating the parents.
Yes.
And parents often will come at teachers with, it's my child, I know best, and I'll tell you how it is. But schools are expected to sort of educate's the wrong word, but certainly inform parents on what the rules are, why the rules are there, what they can and can't do, and the expectation that parents will support the school in those situations. And, it's not uncommon for a parent to want to contact a child, or indeed for a child to want to contact a parent. Now, often that brings more hassle than it's worth, to be honest. It's better for the school to be sorting out issues that are happening in school and inform the parents later. But, it has been known that parents and students have been contacting each other during the school day, and sometimes for legitimate reasons. But what the guidance is now saying essentially is you must always go through the school office. So if you're a parent and you want to contact your child, the only way you do that is to contact the school office, who will then, at their discretion, contact the child using whatever school mechanism, runners, whatever they've got to enable that communication to happen. But it's not acceptable to have a mobile phone in your pocket, just in case. And I remember, Craig, actually, this has brought a memory to me, watching an episode of, I think it was Educating Yorkshire fairly recently, where a lad was waiting to see if he'd got into, I think it was a football academy, and he was waiting for that call. And this was everything to him. This was going to kind of keep him on the straight and narrow in school if he managed to, get into football academy. So such a big deal for him. And so, the school said, yes, in this situation, you can have your mobile phone on. If you get the call, you can take it. That would be great. And he got the call, and, the head teacher was praising him, called him into the office. Oh, well done. Have you told your mum yet? No, I haven't. Well, give her a ring, get her on the phone. And that's kind of actually what he said to the student in his office. And they had a three-way conversation with the parent about how fortunate this was and how life-changing this was for the student. So it's really interesting that they want to change communications like that.
It is tricky. I mean, okay, you could go back to when I was at school and be like, kids now saying, well, how do I contact my mum? Well, my mum needs to ring me. What does happen? Well, it was fine when I was at school. There were no mobile phones. If they rang in the school on a message, yes, you can make that argument. Things have moved on, and I could see it now. The number of parents, well, I might be able to pick you up later, or I might get Jane to come pick you up because I'm not sure if I've got that appointment. I'll just send you a message. Well, now everything's going through school, and everything's going through, the secretary or the PA or the person in front of the desk. Kids running around everywhere sending messages. It's the extra hassles on schools, and you say the stress of then communicating that with parents. It just seems backwards. Now, look. Don't get me wrong. I want to say something balanced here for the government, dare I. Have mobile phones, and the fact now, obviously, 4G, 5G, the access to the entire internet, the vast array of social media apps and everything that goes along with that, increase the instances of mental health problems, student bullying. Yes, it absolutely has. We're in a very different age and we face different problems, and an awful lot of the stresses and complications. And I mentioned bullying that happens via technology and social media. So, is there some merit in saying we remove that so the students can better focus on the learning and the teaching? I can't argue with that. So, that is true. It just feels like we've gone with a sledgehammer that's non-statutory, and then Ofsted have backed it up by saying, oh, but it kind of is statutory because no one wants to fail their Ofsted. And that's, I think, Dave, where I'm getting a bit uneasy with the balance.
I think it's happened because there has been, it feels like, although I couldn't point you to any specific evidence, it feels like there has been a ramp up amongst the public and politically to drive these kinds of changes, and with other countries looking at how they control or ban mobile phones as well, not just sort of social media and things that are happening in Australia and other countries are looking at that at the moment. But it feels to me like there is a ramp up in demand for this from the public and from the politicians. But I think we should also talk a little bit about, we mentioned it earlier, what are students actually then supposed to do with this phone, assuming that they bring it to school for all sorts of legitimate reasons. When they go through the school gate, what are they supposed to do? Because it's no longer acceptable that they put it in their pocket or they put it in their bag. What should they do with it? Well, the government essentially are suggesting, well, it depends on your school context. It may be appropriate if you're a small school that you hand it to a member of staff at the beginning of the school day and you get it back at the end of the school day. So if you're in a small school and you've got a tutor, then you've got a box that you can put the phones in, and they do that in PE. To be fair, quite often the PE teacher will have a box that they bring out. All the students put their phone in the box, they lock it away in the cupboard. They go out and play rugby, come back, unlock the cupboard, and give the phones back, etc. So it's not uncommon. It does happen. When you've got a really, really large school, that might become a little bit unwieldy, but not completely impossible, let's say. The other option is that you put it in a locker. Of course, in those lockers, the phones can still be going off and beeping and doing all sorts of things, which can cause a bit of distraction and, potentially open to theft or something like that. Or, and this is the thing I want to talk about, or you spend over £75,000 of your school budget to buy lockable and blockable pouches. So if you've never seen any of those things, what they are is the student puts their phone into this pouch and they close it. And by closing it, it locks. And a lot of these pouches basically prevent the electromagnetic signal going to the phone. So the phone essentially is in a dead spot once it's in this pouch. Then you can put the pouch, presumably I think it's okay to put it in your bag at that point because it's locked away, it's lockable and it can't ring, so everything's okay. And then at the end of the school day, there are a number of little stations, and they look like when you go shopping, when you go clothes shopping and you buy an item of clothing, the cashier, has that little thing to take the tag off.
Tag off.
Essentially, the students go up to the wall or the desk, wherever these tag things are, and they sort of scan it against this tag, and that will then unlock the pouch, and then they can get access to their phone, and that's how these things work. But schools are spending thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds on this, and I guess my question is this an appropriate use of school funds? And if it is, shouldn't the government be funding it?
So the answer to those two questions is no, followed by yes.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, public funds, let's point that out, taxpayers' money. No, I would much rather they went on, I don't know, more school trips, extracurricular activity, books, maybe some of those windows or leaks that need replacing in that building, but or the other, just all the things which schools have to pay for, they don't have money for. It is crazy. And that stood out for me. I'm glad you brought it up. It stood out to me in the article. Some schools are spending, as you say, £75,000 on solutions because they just need something in place. I think the school I worked at, big school, 1,200 students, so handing them all in is not really practical. You'd have 1,200 students walk around the school at the end of the day it just wouldn't work. So I would put them in lockers. No, our school didn't have enough lockers. Lockers were for year 7. Every year 7 people got a locker, 200. At the end of the year, they went to do year 7. There were 1,200 lockers in the school. And I thought you could walk down every corridor and there were lockers everywhere. But we just, we only had 300. So the logistics are quite high. And of course, another really interesting thing, we haven't mentioned it yet, it's not quite as blanket as all that. This may not be statutory, but there is other very unambiguous statutory legal requirements out there. Let us mention the Equality Act. That was an interesting one. So you can't have a one policy fits all because the law requires that whatever policy you implement has to accommodate the needs of students for accessibility, disability, medical needs, SEND and such. So there may be genuine reasons that a student requires access to their phone. And if that's the case, then that trumps everything. So now teachers are having to find, does it fall under the Equality Act? Is there a case? Does the parent fill out that case? Do I rule on a case-by-case basis? But that kid's got a phone. Well, I'm allowed an expectation. Why? Under the Equality Act. I can just see the nightmare. But I mean, equality law is very serious and can't be ignored. So there's that. And I'm just thinking the administrative overhead and headache now of senior leaders and teachers of implementing this guidance, because they're worried about Ofsted, meaning they won't be expectation, while really I would rather SLT and teachers were putting their effort on raising the quality of teaching and improving the learning provision that's going on.
Yeah,
Call
interesting.
me silly. Go on.
That's really interesting. And you're absolutely right about the Equality Act that essentially says, look, if a student needs a mobile phone because of their disability, then the school has a legal obligation to enable them to use it. So it creates those grey areas again that we're trying to avoid about, can a student, claim, or a parent put a claim in to say legitimately they need it for X, Y, Z? I don't know. But you make an interesting point here. I think we should, before we close out the episode, just reflect on some of the comments. There have been over 3,000 comments to this article on BBC News, which is incredible. And as a teacher, I'm always amused when I scroll through them to watch what the general public have got to say on these matters. But a few things stood out. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of them. But the first is exactly what you were talking about. Someone said, yet more responsibility and pressure piled onto teachers who should be, after all, simply teaching. And of course, I think for the day-to-day teacher in the classroom, it probably is going to relieve them of a little bit of pressure, because they're going to have these school policies that mean that they do get black and white, and it's probably going to be easier for them on a day-to-day basis. I'll tell you who it's not going to be easier for: the pastoral support workers, the heads of year and assistant heads of year, the senior leadership teams, and all those teachers that are in a management role or a leadership role, where the pressure will be on them to implement those policies. And the one thing that sort of struck me a little bit about all this, the government guidance, the Ofsted expectations, everything else, it's always the expectation on the teacher. This is what you will do. This is what you will implement. well, why can't we change this round and put the onus on the student? If Ofsted come into a school and they're inspecting a school and they see a student on the phone, why is that a teacher's fault? It should really be a question of, excuse me, are you allowed to use this in school? Oh, no, I'm not. Well, what should you be doing with it? And I would like to see more onus being put on students rather than the teachers all the time. But am I just
Heavens
asking for too
forbid,
much?
Dave. Yeah, indeed. I mean, for me, the summary of all this is it appears we're just entering more and more into a landscape with educational policy coming down from education that's less about statutory law and more about how things are enforced and policed through inspection.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting shift because, of course, if it was statutory, presumably there'd be backup support, there'd be funding because you couldn't make it statutory, and neither it is. But this woolly grey area is a lovely way of not funding, but almost requiring and expecting it to happen and putting very strong mechanisms in place to make sure it does happen. It's a really interesting shift.
But yeah, and I think it's happening because to get things through Parliament takes time, it takes effort, it takes money, it takes amendments, it takes all sorts. And so, this is an easy way out for the government to say, look, we're not going to put this in law. That's too much hassle. What we're going to do is say this is strong guidance, and then our inspectorate is going to make sure you try and follow it. And so it's a backdoor to that legislation, isn't it? But I agree with you. It's getting a little bit messy in that sense. The other thing is the comments people were saying, they were saying, well, how about politicians in the chamber first? And I've got a real problem with this, right? Because I do like to watch a little bit of Parliament now and then. And all you see when the MPs are in the chamber is them on their mobile phones. They're not listening to the debate. They're not really engaging in the debate. What they're doing is turning up, waiting to be called by the speaker, saying their piece, and disappearing again. And in the meantime, they're doing all those things on their phones, some appropriate, some inappropriate, as we have found out.
Probably playing Angry Birds, but yes.
Yeah, worse than Angry Birds. But yeah, and it's just... absolutely. I think so. Look, if you want to say to students and you want to say to teachers that it's inappropriate in your workplace for you to be on your mobile phone, well, I think that's true of the politicians as well. So I agree with that commenter. I find it infuriating. But the other thing I was going to mention is that what are the sanctions? So we've talked about confiscation and things like that. But if we dig a little bit deeper into, well, what are the sanctions that schools can actually impose on students at the end of the day?
Ultimate sanctions if they refuse. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what they are, Dave. They're not desirable. They're not desirable for schools to be enforcing. You're talking about things like exclusion.
Yeah.
Well, they're not desirable for a whole number of reasons, least of which is Ofsted turning up and saying, "Can I look at your exclusion numbers and why have they risen?" Well, because you're going to bat me over the head if I don't implement this non-statutory guidance. Sorry, I'm laughing, but it almost seems comical.
Well, because it's a joke. Because you're right, the only sanction that you've got is to essentially suspend students from lessons or exclude them from school.
So thus removing them from the learning.
Removing them from the learning. Absolutely. That's my point. It's like, hang on a minute. All this was supposed to improve learning, but the sanction is to remove them from learning. It's like, I'm not sure about this. Anyway, here's another comment from a physics teacher. And I saw this quite a lot in the comments, actually. There seems to be something in science where they make use of mobile phones more extensively. But they wrote, as a physics teacher, I'm gutted that a potential experiment tool is being banned from the classroom. Also, many children check their timetables and homework deadlines using their phone. Well, they don't need to, right? They don't need to. Yeah. But the next bit I thought was really interesting. Or take photographs of the whiteboard. So actually using it for a genuine learning need.
Yeah. Well, this is true. I mean, yes, you can make the argument that you don't need to check it for homework, but I mean, the irony was the last 3 years that I was at school, we used a product called Show My Homework, now Satchel One. Everything was on there. Or just check whether, oh no, I can't. I haven't got my phone. oh, well, the information will be in, or you have to wait till the end of the day to check that. I mean, so many more of the systems we're using at school are going online, and now the student have access. But yes, an actual tool for cat experiments. You forget a modern mobile phone these days has so many tools in it. I'm not even going to be able to pronounce them correctly, but you've got gyroscopes and you've got all sorts of other things. It knows the direction. It's a compass. And I wasn't even thinking about sciences, Dave. Obviously, I was just focusing on computer science there, but you're right. This thing is great. I think in geography as well, right, we're going to get the phones out and we're going to use this. I mean, it's a full-blown...
photos in scientific experiments and using that as evidence for your results. I mean, we used to do quite a lot of like stop motion animation and stuff like that, because students could, for example, model the phases of the moon or why the Earth has seasons and things like that with plasticine and stop motion animation. They absolutely loved it. You know, the perfect infusion of technology in learning really made a difference. But look,
that's it for
so
me.
much political pressure, so much public pressure that let's just ban them completely. There you go. It's happened.
My last comment, Dave, is don't we have also a responsibility to prepare students for, the life beyond school? Isn't that one of the things we're meant to be doing as well, and all the other things? I mean, what actually happened to preparing students for the next stage in life, navigating adult life?
None of that.
Okay,
just lock them in a Faraday cage and be done with it.
Right. Well, look, we could go on for ages, and I'm sure this won't be the last time one of us or Kat or we're talking about mobile phones, because it'll be interesting to see what happens now that schools have to implement all this. And I'm sure we're going to hear stories and articles come out as a result of some of the implications. And then not to bash governments, because they have a very tough job, but when U-turn comes, we'll be straight here with another episode. Any final thoughts from you, Dave, before we wrap up?
I think I've said it all. Ban those phones right now.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, until next week, take care, everyone. Don't use those phones in schools. Bye-bye.